Alrighty, hello every folks, and good morning. Welcome to another update video here for Final Fantasy Tactics Ivalice Chronicles, aka the FFT remake that we've been waiting for a while here. So here's the thing. I wanted to talk about a few of the bits and pieces that we didn't get a chance to talk about last time. Stuff that came out right after I put the video up, like the fact that it's available on all consoles. At the time, it seemed like it was going to be PlayStation exclusive and stuff like that. But I wanted to discuss a few of the bits and pieces that they actually put out there and then immediately retracted and stuff like that, including this picture right here, which actually, before I forget, just a big thank you to Adonis over from the Discord there. Basically, they've been going and finding a bunch of random interesting tidbits here, there, and wherever. Seeing as I'm trying to get to whatever I can, but hey, man, I've still got a job to do. I've still got kids to watch, so I'm trying the best I can to keep up with everything. Anyway, though, I guess we got to do the YouTuber thing, don't we? Yeah, if you want to see more info on all this, because I will be covering this basically obsessively, just like I did Tactics Ogre Reborn, so if you want to see more of that, do the whole like and subscribe thing. God, that feels nasty to say. I hate saying that. I think we're going to just do that every once, like, a month or something. Anyway, let's go ahead and get to this, shall we? So before we actually get into the nitty-gritty of the stuff that was actually kind of mentioned and or, came up and all that, I want to talk about not necessarily what FFT Remake is, but I also want to talk about why FFT Remake is. Because yes, immediately looking at this picture right here, I know there's already going to be people just like immediately flying off the handle as far as the fact that we don't see two classes on there. This is something that will come up pretty regularly here, as far as, we don't have the version that has everything from every version, and quite frankly, we don't actually know that it's missing anything as of yet, and I want to talk about why we were excited about the Final Fantasy Tactics Remake to begin with. See, the thing is, while it is easy to get riled up and get into that mindset of like, oh my god, it's just a remake, it's just another port with some extra steps, oh, it's so freaking lazy. This happens with every remake. People come up, they fly off the handle, they will nitpick, they will look at something at the most surface possible level, ignoring any and all context up to that point over why a remake even happened in the first place. Because from a layman's perspective, somebody looks at Final Fantasy Tactics and what do they see? Oh, it's available on phones. Before that, it was available on iPads. Before that, it was available on the PSP. Before that, it was on the PS1. It's always been available. And then they have no knowledge whatsoever of what happened with each of those ports along the way. Like, for example, back in the PS1 version, personally, that's my favorite one. And you know what I immediately get told every time I mention it's my favorite one? My man, that translation was pretty frickin' jank. Yes, it was. It was from the era of janky translations, meaning that there's factions that just straight up have multiple different names in several different situations. They have a lot of characters whose names are mixed up in multiple situations. There's a lot of weird translation stuff, though to me personally, it still has just, again, the hottest line throughout the entire series, with the whole comeback of blame yourself or God. Hell, it's one that's such a good line. It's actually a death quote in every version of Tactics Ogre. It's that good. But, it's not a direct quote. They say, I blame myself and God, and then die. But anyway, I want to talk about, again, the steps along the way. Because that first one, janky translation, but really, really impressive timing, really impressive sound design. All of the hits are punchy, and in fact, the sound design from that particular game is, I personally believe, one of the reasons that a lot of us have this constant reminder to go back and play more FFT. Why? Look at the sounds. Look at all the sound effects. Look at all the menu sounds. Look at specifically the hit sounds, and you'll oftentimes find that these are sounds you hear on a daily basis. Like a little while ago, our fridge broke, right? And we've never had one of those double door fridges with little flappy things on the side before. And there was a very rare opportunity where somebody's like, hey, here's basically a nothing burger of a price. You just got to clean this thing out. And so we did, and we ended up getting one of those fridges with the little flappy things for once. And what happens every time we open the fridge? Just whoosh, the same thing, the almost exact same sound as one of the hit sounds from FFT. Oh, you tore a piece of paper? Exactly like one of the other hit sounds. Oh, did a car door close? Sounds exactly like one of the other hit sounds. Oh, you pull some, you're walking your dog with a leather leash? That sounds exactly like the bow firing animation. Like, it's just one of those things that I think kind of subliminally always causes us to go back to FFT. Kind of personal crackpot theory on that, but I just found it a little bit hilarious. Anyway, so with that said, let's go ahead and talk about the other ports, because that original PS1 version, okay, jank translation, whatever, incredible sound design though, right? What happens with the PSP version? Because to a lot of people, it's the definitive version. One of my best friends regularly had told me that I was criticizing it for no reason, before I sent them a video of just comparing the sound design between the PS1 version and the PSP version. Because even if you get the lag fixed, because the lag in that version was frankly unforgivable. Like, you want to talk about a port that completely missed the mark, that actually is worth getting angry about? That PSP version, that original War of the Lions version, that's the one that deserves your ire, not what we're looking at right now. Because bear in mind, again, that was also releasing full price at the time, and let's say you take a look at something like Stasis Blade, the original PS1 version, they throw their sword out, every time that one of those little crystals hits something, it's like the little crystalline sounds that they're doing, every single one of them is perfectly on the mark on that frame. It's crisp, it's punchy, it's right there. The PSP version, like, don't get me wrong, everything that's on a PSP I'll adore religiously, but when it comes to that War of the Lions version, like, it's not even close. Like, it makes all of those sounds, and then, like, 4 seconds later, you actually see the animation play out. The lag was that bad, and even when you get the lag fixed, because modders fixed it within, like, a day, even when you get the lag fixed, the timing is still way off. Even if you somehow could fix the timing, on top of that, you have the issue that, we have the sound just plain not being right. Like, when a character dies in the PS1 version, it's like a whole, like this big dramatic scream that they do that echoes. All of those echoes are gone in the PSP version, and all subsequent versions beyond that. The sound, if you listen to the music, while we're listening in the background, you hear how there's a little reverb every now and then on a few sounds here and there. That sort of echoing feeling, that feeling that everything's bouncing off the castle walls. That sound design was critical to that PS1 version, and every version past the PS1 version fucked it up. Those are not there. And even when they did finally, kind of, sort of, a little bit, fix a lot of the later issues of that PSP version, it still was wrong. Those sounds were never fixed in any version past that PS1 version. When it came to the autosave thing, from what I hear back with the original iPhone release and stuff like that, the thing would just not actually keep your save sometimes. When we have the... and please bear in mind, I've bought more copies of this game than is honestly, like, financially justifiable. PS1 version, I bought 3 different copies growing up. Ultimately, I did end up finding them, but for a lot of very family-related reasons, the game was cheap, and I kept losing the disc, okay? I ended up with 3 copies of that original PS1 version. I ended up buying a 4th copy on PSN. I got War of the Lions, that got stolen from me. Bought a 2nd copy of the War of the Lions, lost that one. It's still somewhere around here. Ended up buying the PSN version. Again, so now I have... now I have multiple discs of that PS1 version, plus the PSN version of that PS1 version. Same thing for the PSP version. I bought it on iPad, I bought it on Android, so that the kids could go and try out that version. And even with that Android version, when they added autosaves and everything else, sure, the autosaves are nice, except on the iPad version, where sometimes, when you select to go pick your most recent save, it will basically autosave over your actual most recent save. I'm not really sure why, but when it comes to the actual visuals, they added a fully 3D camera. Sure, kind of random. Why not? I mean, I guess they were upscaling the resolution anyway. Like, if I have heard somebody already doing the standard, like, you might as well have that whole, like, Bart Simpson say the line meme every time there's a remake. Oh my God, this looks like an emulation filter. Yes, because you can filter basically anything into an emulator at this point. Who could have figured? But when it comes to When it comes to the way that the visuals looks, like it looks, they look like clay people in the mobile ports. Again, like you have all these comments repeatedly that are popping up, especially on Steam. Like, good lord, I feel so bad for anyone that ever has to moderate anything on Steam because, like, for how great and accessible the thing is in general, there is nothing but depression to be found in any of the community discussions. Like, it doesn't matter what the game is. I don't know if anything can ever like possibly stay positive in there because the expectations people have for a remake make no sense. I have had three people just recently reach out with pissed off comments that it wasn't a 2D HD remake. What possible benefit is there to being a 2D HD remake of all oddly specific things? What's it going to do in this situation? Add some bloom? Yeah, I don't get it either. Anyway, whatever. Point is, there has been no uncompromised version of FFT at all, regardless of platform. Every one of them had pieces of what we remember, but none of them was truly perfect outside of mods. Things like the Lion War are, again, going to be, more or less definitive versions. Specifically, the Lion War, as in, it took the features from the PSP version, it added some stuff from the PSP version, did some hacks to allow you to skip through some stuff, and even then, I don't believe, I forget if it actually included the speed up hack that like the Cerebro mod did and stuff like that. Like you're always going to have bits and pieces all over the place. Okay, none of them had a fast forward feature, unless again maybe someone added it out there through a mod. I don't know. But then we get into that same old argument of like, for the average person, for someone to truly have the sort of like experience of like, here is this thing on the shelf that is the definitive version of this thing, we don't necessarily have that. The closest that we have is the sort of good enough phone port, and I haven't even gotten into the fact that the phone port is it is just a cluster of band-aids. Because not only, okay, so they got rid of the lag, kind of, from the PSP version. How did they get rid of it? Because apparently they didn't have the original code or something, is the reason that I've been told. How did they get rid of it? It randomly fast forwards. And I do mean pretty randomly. Like, about half the animations in the PSP version would slow the game down to a crawl, right? Again, modders fixed that within a day, but again, not everyone's going to be able to go mod their game. And so, what we have is a situation where they technically improve the speed by fast forwarding the game when it's lagging. Okay? Now, the problem is it's still lagging in menus, which can't fast forward. So you have laggy menus, technically a 3D viewing option that doesn't really do anything because it doesn't really have animations for certain camera angles, so you kind of just make everything look super fucky. And then you have an autosave that may get confused with your main save. Hopefully you're keeping track of which is which. And then if all of that wasn't enough, again, you might accidentally just hit the wrong button on your cloud saves and just delete your last play session. I've had that happen to me before. And yeah, ultimately, it's a good enough version, but again, it's also completely busted balance-wise because the PSP version added a bunch of multiplayer items that were intentionally super busted because you weren't supposed to get them unless you had somebody to play the multiplayer maps with. The phone version didn't bother porting the multiplayer stuff, and they just threw it into the fur shop, which basically meant that you could get busted as all hell as soon as Chapter 4 hits by just going to the fur shop. So, either way. Like, look, these are all nitpicks, obviously, from somebody that has played through this thing God only knows how many times at this point. But the thing is, again, the point that I'm trying to get at here is we have not had an uncompromised version of Final Fantasy Tactics ever. Yes, there are mods that have more or less pulled the potential out of every one of these versions, but to see people going and leaving angry comments with the almost no information that we have about this game, like decrying it as a lazy cash grab without that context that we have never had an uncompromised version of FFT before, is just completely missing the point. Anyway, so I just wanted to throw that out there to start off with. It's been something that I've been thinking about at work all day and night, and so let's go ahead and continue on here. So, First of all, things that we are noticing and not noticing. So from this screen, and probably the reason that this is a screen grab that was gotten off of Steam before it was pretty much immediately taken down. Why was it immediately taken down? The same reason that people were showing up with pitchforks to the Tactics Ogre Reborn information. Because there's two classes that are technically not there. Oh my god, they killed my content. Now, let me point something out here real quick. A, we don't actually know that they're gone, and B, we know that there's two versions of the game. So, it is very possible that they maybe just are not there. Personally, I would not be too fussed one way or another. The two classes in particular that are missing here are going to be the Onion Knight and the Dark Knight. Now, first of all, this is Agrius. It is possible that technically she might not have had access to them. I don't know. As far as the UI goes, it doesn't look like there's space for them, and again, personally, personal opinion, I wouldn't be too fussed if they weren't there. Why? It's technically content that wouldn't be there. Because in my personal opinion, the only way to make the Dark Knight actually function as a viable unit, like an actual class that makes sense in context in the game, is if you could only unlock it from collecting Gafgarian's Crystal. Like, as far as its unlocks go, okay? In order to unlock the class, it was one of the most awkward self-references in the series, okay? So, for context, the Dark Knight was a reference to Tactics Ogre. For those unfamiliar, essentially back in the original Tactics Ogre, back in the SNES and PS1 days, and Saturn, whatever, there was the Terror Knight. Okay, now this Terror Knight in later versions would simply be a class mark that you picked up about halfway through the game, and it's a class that specialized in demoralization and essentially breaking stuff down. Now, in the original version, though, it was essentially a soldier that was of a chaotic alignment and had achieved 25 kills. It had some of the best physical strength in the game, and essentially dropped the stats of any unit standing nearby it. It was one of the best physical fighters that was available. Now, the thing was that this oddly specific requirement of 25 kills made sense in the context of Tactics Ogre. Characters are achieving kills regularly. Now, technically in FFT, in order to achieve a kill for a character, because it doesn't keep a kill count on somebody, because, your characters are just part of your 5-man team, they're doing the RPG thing, they are not keeping an active tally of how many kills they've achieved, they have to collect 25 crystals in order to unlock the class, as well as the typical, multiple class requirements. Now, this is super clunky, because normally a character might pick up those crystals, they might pick up 5 or 10 through the entire game. 25 on one character is preposterous. It is nothing short of an absolute grind to get to that point. Is the class overpowered? Sure. But honestly, you could just go get Sid and have the same exact effect. Overall, pacing-wise, it made no sense as a unit. Now, honestly, personally, I don't care if Dark Knight's gone. I would honestly kind of hope for it. But that's me personally. Some people really like the Dark Knight, and more power to you. So far, we don't see that it's there. It might be there. You know what? I don't know. What we see so far is not everything. Technically, we could say that, the units here could be shifted around to have exactly 2 more spots, sure. Or maybe it doesn't. I don't know how much this shifts around. We don't have anything to compare it to, so we technically have no confirmation that they're there, but we don't technically have confirmation that they're not there, if that makes sense. Now, the other character was the Onion Knight, which is one of the most bizarrely balanced units that we've ever seen in an SRPG. Its base form is achieved by essentially maxing out your Squire and your Chemist early on. So you max out your starting classes, and instead of doing anything with that, you put them in a class that can use any piece of equipment, but has the worst stats in the game. Now, when I say the worst, I want to point out that if you ever try to do a Onion Knight only run, it is a unit that, even with the best weapons available early on, basically cannot actually beat Suiji Woods. The thing is comically bad. It is a massive downgrade over every other class in its base form. The idea is that it scales up as you achieve more mastery of different classes, eventually getting to the point that if you master all the classes and get the Onion equipment, it is basically bar none the most powerful thing ever, functionally untouchable, and more or less just runs around just on God mode. again, pacing-wise, it is just a fucking weird unit. I love the idea of the Onion Knight. I wish that it could just be a unit that had access to all equipment, but we skipped all this stuff that potentially made it overpowered. Okay, again, pacing-wise, it just makes no sense. It's weird. It is a weirdly placed unit. Like, that's what I loved about the Mime, that it's a unit that, again, can basically be everything, do whatever the hell it wants, and it's functionally, bouncing off of other units. You got stuff like your dancers and your bards providing a interesting mechanic in terms of their buffs and debuffs and weird attacks. You got the arithmetician that specifically has to calculate where someone's standing and their levels and whatever else, and every one of these previous units can be overpowered in their own way, but none of them are just like, I have achieved full mastery and I am on, in God mode now. Like, it doesn't make any personally, I hate the Onion Knight. As much as I love the idea of the Onion Knight, I actually hate using the Onion Knight, if that makes sense. But again, that's me personally. It's so all over the place in terms of balance. I'm not even sure how you would balance that. And the reason that I bring this up is because in the context of, let's say, Tactics Ogre Reborn, there was a big old stink that ended up coming around because people would confuse the rogue that was removed from Tactics Ogre Reborn with the FFT Thief all the time. They remembered using the Thief in Final Fantasy Tactics, and they were like, oh no, you could totally steal equipment in Tactics Ogre. You couldn't. You stole equipment in Tactics Ogre by recruiting units. The Thief only stole crafting components, and the crafting system in the PSP version was absolute ass. Now, as far as the rogue was concerned, people mostly liked the portrait of that unit, which was a far more fair argument. In reality, the reason that it was taken out of Tor, though, is because the actual underlying mechanics of that unit were freakishly intertwined with basically every single map in the entire game, to the point that it probably would have taken more effort to put that unit in than it took to achieve the entire remake. So, it was a case where one unit in particular had a very oddly specific reason for not being there. Now, hypothetically speaking, if Onion Knight and Dark Knight are not there, why would that be? I think it would be pacing, because they make no sense whatsoever as far as pacing is concerned. I would assume they probably get replaced with something else, like a unique unit of some kind. Personally, my prediction on the whole thing is that we're going to see characters from like 14, 15, 16, whatever, showing up as, let's say, a unique Onion Knight and a unique Dark Knight. That's my personal prediction on the whole thing. I would expect that to probably be reasonably possible. Why? Because again, for your generics and stuff like that, it's just Onion Knight, Dark Knight have no place as far as pacing goes. Like, they just were really awkward additions in the first place. I hope that if they are in the game whatsoever, that they put them in a way that is way less weird. Like, they're not even fun to challenge run with, so what are they doing there? Like, every other class in the game has an interesting challenge run if you decide to go do a SAC challenge. Like, single class challenges of FFT are one of the coolest ways to experience this game, and again, those two classes suck ass for doing those particular challenges. Like, Onion Knight, it goes from barely playable to just a complete nothing burger. Stuff like Dark Knight is just incredible grind followed by no challenge whatsoever. So, anyway, with that being said, let's go ahead and continue on with some other stuff. So, first of all, with this picture, take a look at that level up there. So it looks like for the alternative, like, let's say range mode is what I've been kind of mentally calling it as. It seems like potentially level cap is going to be doubled, seeing as we see Agrius showing up at 92. Now, I would assume this also means faster experience gains, considering, you're probably going to achieve max levels way before then. So, personally, yeah, it just seems like they more or less doubled everything across the board, since HP and MP seem exactly doubled in the few side-by-sides that we've seen. So that's kind of interesting. Additionally, as far as class mastery goes, so we see the Mime showing up with the mastery icon over here. We do see all the other classes showing up with level 8. Now, the thing is, they show up with pretty low JP counts, kind of presumably indicating that they've collected Like, if they're at 8, I would assume they probably would have had enough to afford at least one of these classes being maxed out. So my guess is, and like obviously they would have had a cheated file for the purpose of you know, their preview and whatever else. My guess is that there's maybe some additional stuff to be unlocked, or maybe new skill ranks or something showing up for these other classes. It is really weird that not a single one is mastered by that point, assuming that they are, you know, playing the game at least somewhat normally. Obviously, for those unfamiliar with the spillover mechanic in FFT, sometimes you'd keep extra JP around, because if you do gain a level, that essentially causes that JP to spill over. Now, as far as additional levels go, to me, if that mechanic still works the same way, to my mind, that basically would just indicate that they wanted more spillover to happen between different classes, and that was potentially a quick way from A to B. So that could potentially be what's going on here, but they don't seem to be keeping very much in the tank there for that spillover, so who knows? Maybe I'm just reading too much into that, but as far as I'm concerned, the increased levels here, I don't assume that they're going to do much more, aside from allow that spillover mechanic to do more stuff, which is pretty cool. I mean, it already is pretty friggin' potent, so either way, it potentially could allow for more kind of cross-mastery, as it were. And by the way, for those that don't know what the hell I'm talking about, spillover is basically when your character gets a level as a class, part of the JP that they've gained as that class that they have in their available pool spreads out to the entire party. So basically, if you don't spend your points, they're going to spread their knowledge to the rest of the party, which means that, for example, let's say you wanted to train up your knights super fast, you would get a couple characters training up as knights, they would earn their JP, they would gain a level, and then they would spread some of that JP to everybody else. I forget what the exact numbers were, but if you keep that around as a general rule, you can essentially allow characters to train as classes that they are not currently using. This is especially useful for things like the knight there, who would be able to, let's say, get stuff like equip armor on a wizard or something. So stuff's pretty useful. Anyway, let's go ahead and see what else is available on this list here. Let's see. I think we covered most of this. Oh yeah. So as far as Zodiac goes, yeah, let's go ahead and look at some of these other pictures here. What on earth? Hold on. There we go. Oh yeah, pre-order bonuses, Zodiac stuff. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at these pictures finally. So first of all, we see Zodiac modifiers showing up. So this is going to be, again, one of those cases of kind of niche information, but for those that didn't know, there was always a Zodiac compatibility system between your units, essentially meaning that some characters were always going to do a bit more versus others, or potentially resist a bit more than others. Think of a way weaker version of the elements from Tactics Ogre. In this particular case, basically was like 10-15%-ish different damage. However, in some cases it really mattered. Like if you ever want to see how oddly specific this can get, look up the route that that one guy took to do a single class challenge of a calculator or arithmetician. Basically just a class that on paper is super overpowered if they have access to all spells from the other mage classes, but if it's just the arithmetician by themselves, they basically don't have any abilities and it's just a dude with a stick. And so, well, I should probably point out, very slow dude with a stick. And they actually had to manipulate the Zodiac system as well as the gender system in order to have just enough damage to be able to squeak by through the entire game. Like, it was down to the wire, and additionally required sacrificing several of those units along the way. I remember it being a really interesting read, so go look that up at some point if you're curious. But we do see those modifiers displayed in the menu at this point. Additionally, as far as pre-order bonuses goes, yeah, don't really care too much about the rest of it. Honestly, like, as far as items, I do find it really funny because, like, this sounds like it would be OP from a economy perspective, but remembering your Phoenix Downs, remembering your potions, you're basically pre-ordering in order for them to remember to restock your inventory items. Because, yeah, realistically speaking, I know that personally, like, I find chemists to be super overpowered, and yet they end up balancing themselves because I constantly just forget to go to the store to restock them. So the 10 Phoenix Downs in particular I find to be pretty funny. But the actual interesting part of all of this is that we actually saw a tidbit from one of the descriptions on these that mentioned that you can actually change how Ramza looks. You have different skins for your characters available in your party menu. So this for the deluxe edition you get red and black, and then for the pre-order bit you get white, which basically allows him to actually wear his faction colors. It's actually really funny because the Cerebro mod did that exact thing like 6 or 7 years ago. But whatever. Now, the funny thing about this, first of all, the art for this reminds me of that, man, makes me think of War of the Visions. God, that game sucked. But, anyway, I don't know if it's the same artist. Like, the art was good, but, like, the War of the Visions just had no actual strategy game to it. It's funny, because I remember I kept getting told at the time, like, no, it totally gets good after you're, like, 100+ maps in. And I made it over 100 maps in, and it was the same old, like, levels are all you need to know. Pay-to-win nonsense still. Anyway, whatever. The interesting takeaway, again, is just the fact that you can change his costume in the menu, so that's all well and nifty. The rest of it seemed kinda OP, to be honest. Like they had stuff like being immune to charm, which should presumably make that one thief map early on a lot easier. You had stuff like the tunic giving you permanent shell, which is like that seems kind of cracked. I don't know what to tell you. Magic +1 ring and whatever else a few chapters early, which doesn't seem like it would be much, but if you go and steal, like, let's say, Ovelia's hat and put it on somebody, you'll notice how significant that could potentially be. So, either way, all the stuff that they had as far as these items go seems a bit much in my personal opinion. Like I do appreciate that they did mention that you have the option to turn these off in the menu though. So if you need them for, let's say, a challenge run to get yourself started early, you have them, but you do have the option in the menu to turn them off. So I appreciate that. I really wish that New Vegas would have shipped with that, but thankfully that's like 15 years of hindsight at this point. Anyway, God, that is so. How is that so old at this point? Why am I so ancient? What is this dust forming on my skin? Anyway, let's see. This is actually an interesting thing that Donna's pointed out, which is that undead units actually have an undead icon at this point to remind you that the skeleton thing is actually undead, which, granted, should be a given. This is, I guess you could argue a thinking person's game. But I guess it's good to be reminded that a skeleton is a skeleton every now and then. And yeah, so there's that. All right, let's see what else there is here. Oh yeah, voice callouts. So I actually missed it in the trailer, but we do seem to have confirmation that callouts are actually voiced. Now, I don't know if we'll see that from the generics. I hope so, but we'll find out then. Okay, so I think that's more or less everything that I wanted to cover in this one. Because, yeah, I wanted to specifically touch on the previous port problems. Already had plenty of rant about that. What the new level cap potentially means, mastery stats and all that kind of thing. Onion Knight and Dark Knight. Again, personal opinion, I know that it's technically less content, but God, I kind of hope that they're gone. Like, I hope that they're a unique class. Like, it has been discussed a few times that the team is also related with, FF14, 16, all that kind of thing. So I do personally hope that we get those characters as unique versions of the Onion Knight and Dark Knight, respectively, rather than just the way that they were implemented in the PSP version. PSP War of the Lions, again, I just think it was really awkward implementation. Now, the multiplayer stuff, actually, that's the other thing. The only thing we've technically seen brought back, or though we've technically seen mentioned directly, is that the War of the Lions translation was thrown onto the PS1 version, more or less, as the sort of like classic edition or whatever else. Now, I saw some folks mad that it didn't have the original PS1 translation. Again, the reason for that, more than likely, and especially considering that from what we've seen, it doesn't seem like a verbatim War of the Lions translation. I would assume, again, just due to the sheer number of confusing errors that the original one had. I mean, like, don't get me wrong, I love the lines of the original one. Like, it had some real, like, punchy lines. But there were a lot of weird mistakes in there. So, like people generally referencing the wrong faction, or announcing that a certain faction is their friend when it's the other way around, just due to the fact that they didn't know who was talking to who. so, so either way, it would be it's probably fine. Like, as far as the classic experience goes, I think it's a fine middle ground between between those few different things there. So yeah, that's probably everything to mention at this point. So that'll be about that. I should probably go actually get some sleep here, because this literally was just like I was mentally steaming over a third shift. Shift there, over what to discuss for this one, and yeah, hopefully that covers a few new things to hopefully tide you over and whatever else. And yeah, I will see you in the next one. So y'all have yourselves a good one. Take care. Thank you for stopping by, and I will see you then. Later.